Welcome to EnigmaCast, nerds. I've got a special guest on tonight, Doc Brown, a.k.a. Justin Brown, East Tennessee boys. As you can see, they break the mold when they make our type there. And so, Doc Brown has written a book, and I have brought him onto the show to talk about this book, Enigmites. This is a fascinating book that he has written. I've actually am in the process of getting ready to order it. My schedule's been jammed up. And I'm actually happy to meet your acquaintance, Doc, and introduce you to all my Enigmites. So, Doc, please tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we can dive into your book there, buddy.
Hey, man, I appreciate you having me. And, we found out pre-roll. We've stomped around in the same woods.
Yeah.
We're both, tri-state area, East Tennessee boys.
Yep.
And we got a mutual friend with Harley. Mm-hmm. So he's the one that hooked us up. So, Harley, if you watch this, man, I appreciate it. But, yeah, man, I'm a hillbilly, man. I'm an East Tennessee boy. Been a factory rat most of my life. And, I grew up and was raised in the church, of course, had my, rebellious stage like anybody else, but was always fascinated with history, UFOs, cryptids, and the Bible, and just all the weird stuff, And it was probably maybe around 2012, I got exposed to like Trey Smith from God in a Nutshell on YouTube. And then that kind of just led me down the road to like Derek Gilbert, Mike Heiser, Dr. Judd Burton, and just some of these people that kind of run in our circles, and started just showing me all this fascinating stuff in history and in the Bible and all these ancient texts. And it just blew my mind, man. And it was kind of like Aladdin, it opened me up to a whole new world. And I just started going down these rabbit trails, man. And next thing you know, I started talking to friends about it. And we were like, hey, one of my buddies was like, let's start a podcast. And so I think it was in 2022, started a podcast with some buddies called the Dig Bible Podcast. And we done that for a year and a half or 2 years. And then I wanted to go deeper into not just the Bible, but into ancient lost civilizations and cryptids, UFOs, all that kind of stuff, but just kind of filter it through my biblical perspective on things. So then I started the Prometheus Lens. And long story short, ended up stumbling on this subject matter with Esau, and started going through just all kinds of rabbit trails with ancient biblical texts and extra biblical texts and Jewish legends and lore. And just, man, I found a really cool story that was broken up into a million pieces and put it together for the first time. This, I can honestly say, this is unexplored territory. It was fascinating to find it.
I totally agree with you, man. I've got the cliff notes of your book. And I want to, before we get into that too, I also I caught one of you, like I said, I told you my phone spies on me, so I'm getting some of your contents blowing up, and you actually had a very interesting take on the Book of Revelations that I've been saying for a while that I totally agree with you on, and we'll get into that as we progress. But real quick, man, tell everybody where they can find you and where you're at, and let's give your book a proper plug here.
Yeah, man. As far as like the podcasts, it's the Dig Bible Podcast and Prometheus Lens Podcast. Anywhere you can consume content, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, any of those places, you just search up the name, you can find it there. Same thing with the social medias. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, X, TikTok, all those places. Just search up the name, you'll be able to find it there. And the book, it's exclusively on Amazon right now, so just go to Amazon and just type in the Epic of Esau, and you'll be able to find it.
Yeah, and all the contact information will be in the description of Enigmites. You can click on that and go there. I'm going to try to put the book link in there as well, if it'll let me do it. Put the book link so you can click it and go get the book. I'm going to order it as well to get into it. So, Doc Brown, real quick, I have some heathens. Not everybody was raised like we were with a belt and a switch and in the church. So, real quick, before we get into it, give my Enigmites just a quick rundown on who Esau was and a little bit about. It's a very famous story. It's actually like one of the, I would say, consider a pillar story in the Bible. And then we're going to lead off into your theory, which is I find amazing.
Yeah, and Esau is honestly one of the most enigmatic characters in the Bible. And it's kind of like the Genesis 6 event, that's blowing up so big now, the Nephilim giants.
Right. Yep.
You hear so much about it, and it plays such a pivotal role in the biblical texts, and all your conspiracy theories, it all branches back to these Nephilim giants. Mm-hmm. But in your Bible, you just get this little blurb in Genesis 6, and that's because the biblical writers, they felt they didn't need to theoretically beat a dead horse, mm-hmm. because they had well-established oral traditions, all these other scrolls that went into great detail about this event. So they weren't thinking about us thousands of years later.
Right.
Reading this. So they were like, that subject's well covered. We don't need to go into detail about that. And that's the same thing I think that happened with this guy named Esau. So when you go into the Bible, it just says that, there's this birth of these twins, or the conception of these twins, Jacob and Esau. And the angel of the Lord says that, tells the mother that 2 nations, 2 peoples are in her womb, and they battle against each other in the womb. They're at enmity with each other in the womb, and that one would be stronger than the other, but that the younger would rule over the older. And in Jewish context, that's completely backwards. The eldest was the one that ruled, and the younger served the older. So then when you get the birth, it says that Esau comes out red, covered in hair from head to toe, like a hairy cloak.
And I think it also says too, right? Like he was gripping the ankle of his brother.
Yeah,
like
Jacob, the younger brother, was gripping his heel.
Yeah, gripping his heel, right? Yeah. So
yeah. And when you go through, it kind of just fast forwards to their adulthood, and it just says one day that Esau is the mighty hunter. He's known as this mighty hunter, and he comes in from the field exhausted, and he sees his brother making some red stew, and he tells his brother that he's exhausted and he wants some of that red stew. And Jacob says, "Well, trade me your birthright, and I'll give you the stew." And the birthright is basically like, modern context. If your father was Donald Trump and you're the eldest son, you're going to inherit the business. You're going to get the millions of dollars, and you're the next in line with the keys of the kingdom. That's the birthright. So in this story, Esau just says, sure, what use is a birthright to me? When I'm dead, take it. And just willy-nilly, just trades the birthright. And then, so even that didn't make any sense to me as a kid reading that story. And then the biblical text just kind of, gives you the genealogies after that. And he births this Edomite race that basically is a thorn in the side to God's people. And they're always, fighting each other and at enmity with one another. And that's all you get, with basically the biblical narrative.
Yes. The story again, when it was, I use the term when ink was put to paper, in their minds, this was like an everyday, like, okay, this isn't a big deal because they were into it. But like you said, 2,000 odd years later, when we're looking back on it, I've always found the story of, when I read the story of Esau, he was so hairy that they said, I think it was when his brother deceived his father, that his mother killed a lamb and put the lamb skin on him. So when his father was blind, he would touch him. I thought to myself, like you're that hairy. I just found it really odd, right? I found it very odd, right? And then again, he was referred to as the great hunter. And so I'm really big into that book back there, the 54 Apocrypha, the books that were taken out of the Bible Council of Messina. And it was not uncommon, man. Like if you read the Book of Enoch, the Book of Genesis makes like crystal clear sense why God came down and how everything was perverted and how they birthed the Fae. The Nephilim created the Fae, and what modern day, lack for a better word, a Bigfoot, right? I mean, like there's no other word for it. A Sasquatch, get into it, right?
Yeah.
And so that is, so in your book, I haven't read it yet. So in your book, is that the angle that you take towards who Esau really was, or?
Well, what I done is as honestly this was, you get to follow my trail of discovery, honestly, because my first assumption was when I read it, I was like, man, this sounds like a Sasquatch to me.
Right.
You know, if we let the text just say what it says, you know, remove our preconceived notions, what we're taught. If we took that description and seen this quote unquote man out in the woods or out on the street, we would say, I seen a Sasquatch.
Mm-hmm.
And like you had mentioned, you know, when they deceived their blind father, they killed a goat and put a goat skin over the top of
right.
the brother. And so the people that want to say, oh, well, this was, you know, poetic language, this was hyperbole, you know, he just had a good, you know, thick beard on him. No, I mean, he was literally that hairy.
Yeah.
So I throw out that hypothesis. I'm like, you know, he sounds like a Sasquatch, you know, and I want to look further into this. But as I got to looking, I started going through all these other extra biblical books and texts. And I do hold to that, but I started finding all these other little interconnective tissue that went along with it. And like, for instance, I actually had Trey Smith on the show, and we were talking, and he was like, oh, well, you're from East Tennessee. That's Bigfoot country. Maybe I'll come down and we'll go Bigfoot hunting sometime, and we'll record it, make a documentary. And I said, yeah, man, come on down. And out of nowhere, that verse just sprung into my mind. And that was the first time that I had this kind of light bulb moment. And I was like, Trey, what do you think about Esau? You know, he come out red, covered in hair from head to toe. That sounds like a Bigfoot, don't it? And he was like, hey, you might be onto something. Yeah, he was one hairy dude, wasn't he?
Yeah.
And it was like that next week I had Gary Wayne on, and we were going through the Epic of Gilgamesh.
Right.
And we get to that story, and we get to Enkidu.
Yep.
He's covered in hair, and he's this mighty hunter, and fights with Gilgamesh. And I'm like, dude, it sounds a lot like this, you know, Esau. And then I tell you no lies, the very next week I had another guest on, and we were having to go through the Book of Jasher.
Yep.
And I'm reading through the Book of Jasher, and then boom, I get to this story that is almost, I mean, a mirror image of the Epic of Gilgamesh. But it's Nimrod and Esau.
Really?
And a lot of historians align Gilgamesh and Nimrod anyway. And this Enkidu is described exactly like Esau. And so when you get into the Book of Jasher, it said that Nimrod had built up contentment and resentment and jealousy against Esau all of his days. And that both of them, their claim to fame was they were both the mighty hunter. So I said to myself, I was like, it's kind of like the Highlander, man.
No.
There can only be one, baby.
You are 100% onto something too. Like, I actually have the Book of Jasher. We actually one of my co-hosts is working on it with me, the Book of Jasher. I haven't read it yet, but I tell you what, man, you are onto something right there, because I am extremely familiar with the Epic of Gilgamesh, to the fact how Enkidu was created by the gods, which it really wasn't. It was in the Sumerian tablets, Enigmites, the Book of Enoch and the Epic of Gilgamesh, the Sumerian tablets, they read the same. One of them's like a sci-fi novel, the other ones are talking about the angels. So in the Sumerian tablets, they said that, you know, the Anunnaki gods, we would call them the fallen, if you're a Christian, one of the fallen angels, right? They created Enkidu to calm, you know, Gilgamesh down. I did not know about that Esau and Nimrod connection. But Nimrod, absolutely 100% was a menace, right? And I think it was said that I read something the other day that was telling me that Nimrod, again, he was the great hunter, and that he also claimed to be 2/3 Nephilim. I don't know if you ever heard that before.
Yeah.
And supposedly he had the clothes that God crafted for Adam when Adam, walked out of the garden. Have you heard this, done the same thing, this rabbit hole as well?
That's the main theme of my book.
Oh, is it? So, well, there you go, man. So look, hey, man, you're right on your, you're my type of weird, bro. We just became friends, man. Look, so yeah. So yeah, please, I don't want to steal that thunder, but man, I got to tell you, Doc, man, good connection, man. That's a good pull right there. I mean, that is really, really, that's very solid, man. That is really good. Yeah. So please continue. Yeah, go ahead. But yeah.
Yeah. So, like I said, it was kind of like this Highlander scenario.
Mm-hmm.
There can only be one. So these two mighty hunters were going to clash and see who the real mighty man was. Mm-hmm. And it says in this Book of Jasher that Nimrod basically goes out with a hunting party and goes to hunt this hairy, quote unquote, man, this hairy beast of a man, Esau. And it says that he goes out with two of his Gibborim. And in the Hebrew, that is the same word used to describe the Nephilim giants.
Oh, wow.
And when you go into the Sumerian kings list, how you were talking about Gilgamesh was named as, 2/3 God. Mm-hmm. His father was listed as Lilu. And Lilu was a vampire demon. So here you have, something like, sounds like it's straight out of a comic book. You have this 2/3 God giant with, vampiristic fatherage with two other Gibborim giants hunting this hairy Sasquatch man in the woods. But it says that Esau sees them coming and he hides himself. And that when they're, unsuspecting, he springs out from the wilderness and cuts off Nimrod's head with a sword.
Wow, okay.
And that he fights off, and that goes with the whole vampire thing, cutting off the head.
Yeah.
And then he fights these other two Gibborim and kills them. So he kills not one, not two, but three giants single-handedly in combat. And then the other hunting party that came along, but they were separated from them, heard the cries of the other men and come to run to see, what was going on. But it says that during all this commotion, that Esau takes the time to remove Nimrod's garments.
Oh, okay.
And it says, and these garments were the reason that Nimrod was able to prevail and conquer all the nations. So you don't know at this moment, what's so special about these garments, but it attributes his power to ruling over these nations to these garments. And Esau knew it, and he took them. And then it says that Esau runs back to his tent and hides the garments. And then he goes into his brother Jacob's tent.
Okay.
And there, Jacob is preparing red stew.
Really?
So it dovetails perfectly
right.
into the book of Genesis. And it answers the question, because Genesis just says that this mighty hunter comes in from the field exhausted.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was exhausted, all right.
Yeah, he was.
He just fought three giants to the death and just killed the king.
Yeah.
He's on the run, probably sustained some life-threatening injuries in this exchange, probably bleeding out, scared for his life, on the run from killing the king. He's desperate. So I think that this, asking for the red stew is more kind of like allegorical, like, sew me up, sustain me, give me sustenance and hide me. And it makes a lot more sense to his comment when Jacob says,
I was just thinking
trade me the birthright. What use is a birthright to me when I'm dead? Take it.
Yeah, for sure.
And when you read it, there's so much urgency in Jacob's voice, because it ain't like he just says, you should trade me the birthright. Okay, yeah, let's do it. No, when you read that, Jacob says, trade me the birthright. No, tell me you will do this thing. No. Swear to me you will do this thing. So it's like you can hear the urgency. And so, you can just picture this event going on, him probably holding his guts, bleeding out and scared to death and, take it. What use is the birthright to me when I'm dead? Help me.
Yeah.
Promise me. You know, so it was pretty cool finding that. And of course, my next question, as I'm discovering this, I'm like, what is up with these garments?
Yeah.
What's so special about these garments? And when you keep reading through Jasher, you discover that these are the supernatural garments from the Garden of God that was given to Adam as a covering. And it traces it that this is the birthright. And it was passed to the eldest son, kind of like the order of Melchizedek. It was the sign and symbol of kingship and priesthood. And it follows. It goes from Adam, to Enoch, Methuselah, to Noah. And it says that Noah had them on the boat and carried them through the flood.
Yeah.
And that in Ham's going out, that Ham stole the garments.
Yeah.
And then give them to Cush. And that Cush hid them away. And it says that Nimrod was the child of his old age, and whom he loved exceedingly. And that at the coming of age, when Nimrod turned 20 years old, he was given the garments. And that when he put on the garments, he became a Gibborim.
Yeah.
And that answers the question everybody postulates in the book of Genesis, because it doesn't say that he was a Gibborim. It says he became a Gibborim.
That's very well stated right there, and exactly right. I've had this conversation before about Nimrod, how he wasn't like that always, and when he became 2/3 God is when he put on those clothes, right? And another fun fact, I don't know if you knew this or not, Doc, but the oldest word ever discovered for a vampire is actually Sumerian, vampirium, right? So I don't know if you can add that to your list as well, because I didn't know about the blood drinking, basically Nephilim the lineage that came down there as well. But no, that is so. I'm in. It makes perfect sense to me. Like I'm wired that way though. But I could actually too, when you were talking about it, I can see him coming back from battle, fighting 3 giants. I mean, Nimrod was reported to be about, I don't know if he was always this big, or when he put the clothes on, he became this big. But Nimrod was somewhere around 15 feet tall, is what they were saying he was, from what I was reading, right? And correct me if I'm wrong. He was also building the Tower of Babel, which some people say he was. A Stargate or some type of ancient technology that it wasn't just a tower that he was building. And that would mean that like Esau would had to have been, maybe not 15 feet, but he definitely wasn't 5 feet tall. Like he must have been a pretty imposing figure himself at 8 feet, 9 feet tall. And when you go into, Sasquatch and Bigfoots, the ones in Alaska, there's actually a medical term for it. Creatures that live in colder environments get bigger over time, right? So the farther north you go, the bigger creatures get, especially in very cold places like Russia, the wolves and all that stuff. And the Bigfoots in Alaska, they're reported to be 12 to 15 feet tall. And you get down around Washington State, they're always like 10. You get down around Appalachias, they're like 8, 9 feet tall. So, and you get down towards the skunk apes, down towards Florida, they're always 8, 7. So you can just see there's a little progression in there, right? But no, I could see Esau saying, "Hey, look, I'm dying. Like, help me, hide me, feed me. They're after me, right? Swear it, right? So yeah, what does it matter if I'm dead, right? That's a really good one, man. Nah, good. Hey, good connected dots there, man. Good job, bro.
Yeah, man. It was awesome just to find this stuff. I love digging through this stuff and connecting these dots. And so when I found that too, I had to go back to Genesis, and then I got to looking, and I was like, is there any more backstory to these garments? And I stumbled across Louis Ginsburg. And he wrote like a 7-book series called The Legends of the Jews. And he compiled all the ancient legends and lore of the Jewish people and compiled them, in a 7-book series. And it's amazing I got the digital copy through Logos software, and so I got to looking through there and reading some stuff, and I was going through just even the Bible, you know Lucifer, or not even Lucifer, because I mean that's a Latin translation, but the Nakash in Genesis, that Hebrew word can mean serpent. That's
Right.
how it's translated into English. But for those that's not familiar with Mike Heiser, he done great work on breaking that word down, and just the Hebrew language is just like the English language. One word can have multiple meanings. So you have to look at the context of how that word's used to figure out, what is the best, word to put in there. So when you read in the garden, about this Nakash that deceived Adam and Eve and caused the fall, this word Nakash, it can mean serpent, but can also mean the shining one, or the one who practices divination.
Mhm.
So what makes more sense? A talking snake caused the fall of Adam and Eve, or a shining one, a one who practices divination, a divine being, a member of God's divine council that was there, that rebelled and caused the fall? That way, that was something that Adam and Eve seen every day in the garden, was familiar with, trusted. To me, I mean, that makes a lot more sense than a talking snake.
Yeah, no, you're totally dialed on. I'll add a little extra layer there. I've had several conversations, and I think now people may be starting to come around a little bit more. I've often said that 100% it wasn't a snake. I even went to the theory that it was a reptilian-like creature, like a Draco or something like that, because if you read the Bible, Satan is referred to as the dragon, that old serpent or something like that, right? And then there was also something I read that he took on the form of a dragon as his final form when he fought Michael, when him and Michael battled. And again, if you follow every single ancient culture has a word for a shape-shifting reptilian creature. Every single one of them, from the African Zulu to the Japanese, to the Hindus, the Naga. Even South America, in Peru, they have a statue down there of a giant reptilian-looking god that they used to pray to back in the day that looks like basically kind of a T-Rex head, right? But when you read the fall of Adam and Eve, they call it the temptation of Eve, but really all he does is ask a question. Did God really say this? Did he say you can't do that? Did he really say that? Adam's not present when this happens, right? Eve's alone with what you just said, with something that didn't scare her. It wasn't like the snake was just there talking to her. There is no other mentions of any other animals talking in the garden. There's no other like she's talking to a dog or a rabbit. Like it wasn't like an enchanted forest, right? So to me, I'm like, I always on this channel I have like a baseline mentality of what I approach to. Like, okay, we know it was something, right? We know that something happened, that something was there, but it wasn't a talking boa constrictor on a tree branch like that. What was that movie? Mowgli was, the Jungle Book. It wasn't that. I 100% wasn't that, and that bothers Christians. I don't know why, man. And like I said, man, that bothers Christians when I bring that up, that it could possibly be that. And if you even go and read more, I mean, if you just analyze the text, when he comes into the garden, he looks at Eve and asks, "Where's Adam?" Right? Why are you hiding? What's going on? He already knows. You know what I'm saying? It's the same way, like I say, you catch your kid drawn with a crayon on the wall in the bedroom, and you walk in there and said, "Who did this?" You already know who did it, right? She's the only one in the room with a crayon. But it was the punishment for the serpent. The serpent didn't speak, right? He doesn't really say anything, doesn't do nothing. And he says, "Okay, you're doomed to crawl on your belly for the rest of your life, and you'll be I think what he said, a sore in them, and there'll be a bruise on your you'll be a sore on their heel and a bruise on your head," or something like that, right? And then, man, the Bible goes on to constantly reference those on the earth and in it. On the earth and in it. On the earth and in it. Will bend the knee or whatever. So that is another good reference right there too, because if you go down, if you don't even have to go down that, if you just subscribe to the theory that the Watchers were on the earth at that time, she was talking to somebody that she knew, or that something that didn't alarm her, and it was just he just put that seed in her ear and she ran with it, right? So yeah, that's another great connection. Or what? So in your opinion, what do you think it was?
I think it was a member of God's divine council.
Right.
You know, because where it says, you know, in Genesis, it says, let us make man in our image.
Right.
That's plural language. I don't think that was the Trinity. That's how I was raised. But after I got to reading and studying that stuff, I mean, they had a divine council worldview.
Yeah.
And the Greeks stole it. When you think of Zeus and the pantheon of gods, that's how the ancient Jewish people seen Yahweh. But he was the creator God, and all these other gods were created, you know, little g
lowercase
gods. Yeah. And they, you know, helped him like a family or a king's court. And when you go to the book of Job, when he finally gets fed up with Job's griping, and he says, you know, where were you when I laid the foundations? Where were you when I hung the stars and did this and did that and laid the plumb line? And he said, and where were you? He said, when the morning stars, the sons of God, the B'nai Ha Elohim, sang for joy at the sight of creation. So that shows you they were there. They witnessed creation. So that's the us and our, that God's let us make man in our image, because the book of Job tells you they were there. And this Nakash was one of them.
Yeah.
And I think through my studies that he was the first king or priest of creation. Because when you go to Ezekiel 28, and all scholars agree that this is talking about, you know, Satan, the Nakash. Mm-hmm. It's a condemnation to the king of Tyre, but halfway through it changes, and it's clearly not talking to a human anymore. Mm-hmm. It says, you were in the Garden of Eden. It said, you were perfect in the day that you were created until iniquity was found in you. It said, every precious stone was your covering. Sardis, topaz, beryl, onyx, jasper. It lists all these stones. The Masoretic text lists 9, but the Septuagint lists 12. And it says, you know, and there was gold inlays in your settings, and, you know, and talks about how beautiful this garment is. Well, this is a complete Polaroid image of the priestly ephod of the priests. That this was the instructions that God gave to Moses to make for the priests. And
before they
even when you go down,
right?
yeah, and when you go down, even in that same chapter there, it says, when it's talking to Satan, it says, and you profaned your sanctuaries. Mm-hmm. So it's painting Satan in a priestly role, wearing a priestly garment. And it says outright that he profaned his sanctuaries. So he had a sanctuary. He had a priestly garment. So I was theorizing in my head. I was like, what if when he tried to deceive his, you know, younger brother, if you look at, you know, Adam and Eve and the heavenly beings, mm-hmm. as like the family of God, mankind is the younger brother. The heavenly beings are the elder brother. If, you know, if the Nakash tried to deceive the younger sibling, and in doing so, it backfired, and he was demoted.
Yes.
And that God removed his priestly garments, stripped him of his position, and bestowed it upon mankind. And that is the coverings that was given to Adam.
No, that makes a lot of sense to me too. I think also in the book of Job, when Satan appears before God, God said, "Where have you been?" I think he said, "Walking to and fro."
To and fro on the earth,
on the earth, right? Like it was his, right? But I mean, it's not anymore. But No, that's great, man. No, that's really good.
And see, and the rabbis, they all trace their beginnings and origins to Adam. They said he was the first king and priest of all creation.
Right.
And the first thing he done when he left the garden, he did a sacrifice and everything else. But when I found Louis Ginsburg, The Legends of the Jews, they say outright that the coverings of Adam was the coverings of the Nakash. So it come right out and said it, you know. So I was like, well, there you go.
Yeah, there it is.
And so that's, you have this is the birthright. So something that was Satan's, you know, pride symbol, something he wore with pride and pomp, you know, his status symbol was taken from him and given to his, you know, quote unquote younger brother, something beneath him.
Right.
That he was trying to trick is now walking around with his position, his priestly garments. That alone would make Satan hate you and explain the motive
for sure.
his hatred for mankind.
Absolutely. What that would make perfect sense to you, right? Like why? Like there's the never-ending hatred cycle, knowing that sooner or later, you know, that his, you know, sooner or later the ultimate follow it through. Well, actually, a good segue right into the Book of Revelations, where I want to take this conversation. That he has an expiration date. He doesn't, and that's why I tell. So one of the reasons why I tell, one of the conversations that I talk to people is about, you know, I don't put any stock into timelines, none whatsoever. No one knows the day or the time, right? And Jesus clearly said that, except my Father. No one knows the day or the time except for my Father. And I think that's because Satan doesn't know it either. That's the thing too, that I think that it's one of God's mysteries, or one of his master strokes on his plans is that keeps Satan always, you know, any second now could be my last or whatever, right? But it led me into this conversation I've been having with people, and some people are starting to come around to it. And I saw one of your short clips as I was going through, where I tell people that the Book of Revelations is actually a 2,000 plus year old, you know, story. It's not something that everybody's waiting for it to start. No, if you read it and you go into it and you really go into it, you start breaking it down. Like it's almost from me looking at it, it's like it's way past halfway completed, right? And it's like, so when the term revelation, I use the term to reveal, right? It's a revealing of scenarios to go through with it. And there's things in the Book of Revelations that I read and people are waiting for happen, and I'm like, no, that's like already happened. Like that's already done. Like that seal has already been opened and broken. And then what we have, I'm going to get your thoughts on this. What we have is that human beings, we try to put like a calendar on everything. When I try to explain to them that the Bible says one day in heaven is 1,000 years on earth. Like that's in the scriptures where it'll say that, right? But there's a thing in there where it talks about, this is where I want to make sure, on your video it came to me, and it's something that I always found as unexplainable, is when Satan was cast down, it said it took 1/3 of the stars with him, right? And if you look up into the sky at like, I want to get this right. I can't remember the constellation name.
Yeah, Hydra.
The Hydra constellation. So yeah, so explain that to do you subscribe to that too? Because that fits for me. But can you explain that for us, Doc?
Yeah, Revelation 12. Yeah. I'm a firm believer that, you know, that was the birth of Jesus.
Yes.
And because when you read that, it says plainly, it says, behold, these signs were in heaven. It says, a woman clothed in the sun. That's Virgo.
Yes, that's it. There you go.
And the sun in her womb. You know, that's the S-U-N and the S-O-N.
Right.
It's pregnant with meaning. And it says that she was crowned with 12 stars on her head. That's the constellation Leo.
Yep.
Leo has 12 stars. And then it says the moon under her feet. And it says the dragon laying at her, laying underneath her in wait to devour the child. That's the constellation Hydra. And where the stars take the same path year after year continually, it's like a clock.
Mm-hmm.
And with all the software we got now, you can go in and rewind those hands just like any clock, like a time machine. And all of those things line up over the Middle East.
Mm-hmm.
And when you take the moon specifically and put it under her, you can narrow that date down and time to a 2-minute window.
Wow, that's awesome.
And it takes you back to September the 11th, 3 BC. That is the birth of Christ. And that is the star or sign in the heavens that the Magi seen.
Yes.
And so, and it says that when this happens, it says this is when the war breaks out in heaven.
Yeah. So
it's like, I believe that when this happened, this is when Satan and his entourage was like, okay, this is it. This is the plan. It's going down now. We got to make our move.
Yeah.
And the war breaks out, and it says that that the tail sweeps down a third of the angels. And what's crazy is when you look at Hydra, its tail takes up exactly 1/3 of the night sky. And where the tail is, there is a significant lack of stars compared to the rest of the sky.
It's that's unrefutable. And it's not even hard to find. When you spoke on it, I went out there and I was like, that is that. And then also when you go in to not even our Christianity beliefs, you can go back on that same time period, and the Chinese will tell you that they read the same things from the stars, and that the Savior was born or whatever was born to come down there. They're talking about Jesus. I didn't do that any justice because it's been a while since I read that, but all the science pointed to it, and also it makes perfect sense. In my mind, I've always known for a long time. I have I have a personal belief when I read the Book of Revelations that the Mystery Babylon is the Catholic Church. There's nothing wrong with people that are Catholics. I'm not going hard on anybody, but the Catholic Church is Mystery Babylon, right? And when they changed his birthday to the 25th, which is actually covering up a pagan holiday. I forget what it's called, the winter solstice, something like that. Saturnalia, right? And so that right there, if you peel back those layers and you start really getting into it, he was born in September, and for the longest time I was like, I thought it would be July, right? But then this new thing I'm working on is that how our calendar is supposed to be really 13 months of 28 days with 1 day for the resurrection, which was April 1st, which they call April Fool's Day if you believe in the resurrection. That's just how my mind works. But when you look at that stuff, what it is, to go through with it, I cannot understand why more people don't see it. That's when it broke out. It broke out 2,030 years ago is when that started, right? It's not people are waiting for that first thing to happen. That's already happened. We're way into this to this. I can't give you the exact seal or horn or whatever went to it, but we're way.
Well, that's why you see when that happened too, because it said, in Revelation it says, "Woe unto the inhabitants of earth, because he knows his time is short."
Yeah.
Because if you look what happened right at the birth of Jesus, Herod put out a decree to kill all the newborn babies. Because why?
Yeah.
Because Satan and those third of angels that were knocked out of heaven and cast down to earth started whispering into the ears of all the rulers.
Yep.
There's a child born that's going to overthrow your kingdom. You better kill it.
Yeah.
And they started murdering all the babies. But the angel of the Lord warned Mary and Joseph, and they fled to Egypt and were saved.
Yeah,
and the ascension of Jesus Christ, because when you read the scrolls, he gets the scroll from the right hand of the Father, because that's at the ascension. It says, "Behold, a lamb that was slain." He comes in at the right hand of the Father and takes the scroll and starts opening the seals. That's at the ascension. We don't know, like you said, what seal we're on.
Yeah.
But John was seeing Jesus come up from the Mount of Olives, come into the throne room of God and take the scroll and start opening the seals right then.
Yeah, and it's again, I just don't know how more people can't see it. I don't understand it. I often question them too. I try to do this a little bit better. I'm like, have you read it? Like, have you read it? And then like tried to like overlay it to what has actually happened. Jesus says, I forget who said it to, but I saw Jesus fall Jesus says, I saw Satan fall from heaven like lightning, right? And it makes sense. The day he was born, you know what I'm saying? He saw him fall from heaven like lightning, right? Get cast out of heaven like lightning and come straight down. And it immediately, like you said, it immediately kicks off. Immediately starts right there with the massacre of the children. The wise men going back a different route, not going back the way they came, going through it. Them having to flee to Egypt and stay there until they get pulled out. And then it just goes on and then it goes on and it goes on and it gets into it. But that's the thing that where I am at right now I tell people that if you read the Book of Jubilees, it talks about God telling everybody that we're supposed to be on a solar calendar and not a lunar calendar, right? Because it messes up the holidays and also messes up the holy days or whatever. But he also tells them that we are on a divine schedule, right? And no matter what happens or what we do or what goes on, this schedule must be fulfilled and it must come into fruition to happen, right? And God, through his mercy, can prolong an event or shorten an event, but that event is going to eventually happen. And so,
and it all goes with his calendar, God's day timer. Anybody that's into this kind of stuff, I highly suggest you check out Mark Biltz. He wrote a book called God's Day Timer. And he talks about all the Jewish feasts and holidays and how they're significant with prophecy, how all the major events of the Bible correlate with these feasts and holy days. And even the birth of Christ, the September the 11th, that happened during the Feast of Tabernacles. And that's significant because this is when Moses and the Hebrews celebrated when the Spirit of God came down and rested on the ark. And so God's Spirit dwelt amongst his people. And during this week, the people would dwell in tents. And this is when they would celebrate the Spirit of God dwelling amongst his people. So how fitting that when God came in the flesh, he come during the Feast of Tabernacles, but this time he physically dwell amongst his people.
Yeah, and it's funny you brought that up too, because the day I was reading it. I think the month is Nisan. Nisan.
Yeah, Nisan. Yeah.
Yeah. So Nisan 11, it's not a part for a Honda. Everybody, that's actually the Hebrew word for the month. Nisan the 11th. Am I saying that right, Doc? How do you say it?
Yeah, Nisan.
Nisan. Yeah, Nisan. Right. Nisan 11th. Throughout history, that date has been incredibly important. A lot of things have happened on that date over and over and over and over again to go down to it. And I even, I don't want to be that guy, but like 9/11 happened on Nisan 11th as well, and to look back through history to do it. But yeah, that's where I get into trouble with, especially, how we grew up, where we grew up, right? So you can imagine what I just said doesn't go.
I was just saying that there's more than one God, talking about a divine council and stuff. Where we're from, you're a heretic and going to hell.
Yeah, man. So so the conversations I have with certain people, I have to slowly walk them into it. But one of the things that I just for the life of me can't get anybody to. I mean, other than you, you're the only other. You're the second person I've heard who thinks the way I think, that the book of Revelations started 25 years ago when Jesus was born, or however back farther in the day, right? And so it's clearly, to me, like I said, man, it is so obvious to me when you start reading it and you start going through it. And if you just would shift your mind, right? And I try to tell people that biblical prophecy lays over history as well. Like, so if you just if you read the book of Revelations and then just take the religious side out of it and just put down historical events, and you'll be shocked at how these things line up and how they keep moving along. But you would think I'd ask them to pull their back molars out with a pair of pliers, man. I mean, like, they just not having it, not doing it. It was a snake. Clearly says it was a snake. Clearly says it was this. Yeah. Can't do it. So anyways.
And Revelation is tricky too. I mean, the Bible, even in general, but especially Revelation, I kind of view it as like it's a chiasm.
Yeah.
It just rotates right back into itself over and over again.
Yeah.
And I believe prophecy, even though it's been fulfilled and we can see it's been fulfilled, it kind of like it repeats and cycles.
Yeah.
It keeps coming back.
I thought the same way too on how I call you ever seen I know you have. You ever seen the symbolism of the snake eating its tail?
Oh yeah, the Ouroboros. Yeah.
So that's when I'm reading these biblical prophecies, I'm reading that and I'm like, yo, man, like, that's just the thought that I get in my head. And I actually live about 30 minutes west of DC, and I went to DC for the UFO UAP hearings, and I was in there. And one of the admirals was talking about, like, I just did a post about this yesterday. I met Tim Burchett, one of the congressmen from Tennessee, and he's really big into, like, getting this going. But he said that, that they live in the oceans, and that was on camera. Off camera, he said that there was 7 different types of what he called, aliens or ETs, UBIs or whatever, living in the ocean. And then when you read the book of Revelations, all the beasts come out of the ocean, right? They all do, right? And that just burned into my psyche, man, when they were up there talking. And again, if you read the Bible and you read, the Book of Enoch, and then you just go and study and read the Sumerian tablets, they're and now I'm gonna take what you ran with, Esau and Nimrod, Gilgamesh, Enkidu. You lay those on top of each other. They're saying the same thing. They're saying the exact same stuff. One saying they're aliens, the other one saying they're fallen angels. That's where you get the big argument coming back and forth. It's a pretty big argument in the UFO community about they're benevolent or they're, here to hurt us, they're evil. And the same thing when you go into the Bigfoot community, when you get in there, people will say they're, Giganticus, Pithecanthropus, right? They're just some extinct, and that, to me, that just makes absolutely no sense whatsoever, right? And then you get the other ones who say, no, they're divine beings. They have capabilities. They can, disappear. They can do whatever they want to do. There's a lot of orb activity associated with them sometimes when you go into it. But if you just take both of them and overlap them and then go back and read any version of history that you want, the Bible is one of the greatest tellings of history, ever. Major events, and it's still,
and it's just verbiage, you know what I mean? It's the same core. Everybody getting caught up on verbiage.
Yes.
But that's one of the major kickbacks I get is with a lot of people in the Bigfoot community when I talk about, my hypothesis in the book, is they're like, oh, well, what about the woo? It can't be a human because, you have the orbs, UFO, the mind speak, the phasing in and out of reality. And I tell them, I'm like, well, when I followed this trail, the legends of the Jews, they point to Esau being of a serpent seed.
Mm-hmm.
They say that Esau was even born with a serpent's mark, and that his guardian angel, his angel, was Samael. And that's the name of Satan before the fall, according to the Jews.
Yep.
And even in our book, our 66-book canon, the birth of Esau is a Polaroid picture of the curse in the Garden of Eden. Because what did it say? You mentioned it earlier. The curse. It says, I will put enmity between her seed and thy seed.
Yes.
The woman's seed and the serpent's seed. And what did he say? He said one would bruise one's head and the other would bruise the other's heel.
Yeah.
So it's like Satan reached in the womb and kind of perverted and tried to flip the script almost, because Esau comes out first with his foot literally pushing on Jacob's head, bruising it to exit the womb, and Jacob clutching and bruising the heel.
Yeah.
And then you have these garments into play, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, if you know, these garments were taken from the Nakash and given to mankind, and the firstborn is the one that gets the birthright. So if, according to the legends of the Jews, if Esau was a serpent seed, of course he'd want to manipulate and twist the womb to where his seed come out first and got the birthright. That way the garments, his garments, was back into the family fold.
Yeah.
And then when you get to the lineages, now this is what's really interesting, and I give credit where credit is due. This wasn't me. This was me just gathering pieces. But Gary Wayne, in his book, The Genesis 6 Conspiracy, he did such a good job with the genealogies, man. But when Esau marries, he takes 3 wives, okay? And 2 of them are Canaanites. Well, not only are they Canaanites, thanks to Gary and his deep dive, they were Horites and Hivites. They were known giant clans. And the one father-in-law that was mentioned, it said that he was from Mount Seir and that he was a chieftain. Well, when you break down the etymology of that word, Seir, that means hairy.
Right.
So you have this hairy, quote-unquote, Sasquatch man marrying into this Nephilim giant clan that is known to be hairy and breeding with it.
Right.
So you can imagine the kind of, strange pups that would be thrown from this union.
Yeah.
And here's where you have the birth of Amalek, who births the Amalekite race, which once again, when you break into the etymology, that name means blood lickers.
Yeah.
In Hebrew. And these were the berserkers of the Levant. They were known to be just ruthless warriors and dominated the battlefield. And when God's people left Egypt, the Amalekites were the ones that first attacked them. And it says that basically they were like ghosts, that they picked them off one at a time and picked off the women, the children, the elderly, the ones in the back, and retreated back into the wilderness before they even knew what happened. And they tormented them for months like that before they finally even had their battle. And the writings of Rashi, he was a medieval rabbi, he said that the Amalekites were known sorcerers.
Yeah.
And that's why God said, kill every man, woman, child, and animal, because they were known shapeshifters. They would shapeshift into animals to evade capture. And there, in their wilderness wanderings is where you get all of your commandments, do not do this, do not do that. So, I said it in the book, I said, you don't get rules, laws, regulations if these rules, laws, and regulations ain't being broken already.
Yeah.
So what does it say? If we take a look at those, it says, no longer will you sacrifice to hairy goat demons.
Yeah.
It says, and concerning those goat demons in Isaiah, what does it say? It says that these, in the Septuagint, it says, the satyrs will dance in desolate cities. I think they're talking about these Amalekites.
I think they
from
are.
the union of Esau and these giant clans.
No, I think you're right too. And if you go and look at if you go and look at the Baphomet, that's where what they're talking about there as well. And then when you go and read the specific instructions on Jericho, no, kill the dogs. It's to kill all the animals. Don't take anything. Don't take anything out of the city. Don't do any of that stuff. Right? Don't do nothing. And I can't remember the tribe that was in there, but I've always knew that it was some type of Nephilim offspring that was in that giant city of Jericho. Because it talks about how great their walls were, right? Like how their walls could not come tumbling down, right? And to go into no, that's great, man. That's a good genealogy pull right there, man. So yeah. And it just goes to show you that.
But yeah, and in there, but it said, don't drink the blood. Do not seek necromancers or sorcerers.
Oh, yeah.
Do not pass your children through the fires of Molech.
Yep.
I think they were giving them all these because these were the practices of these Amalekites, and God's people were starting to imitate them. So God laid down the red line and said, no, you can't be doing this. And when they finally end up having their battle, this is that famous story where Moses has to hold his rod, his supernatural rod, over his head on that mountain to defeat the Amalekites. And it says that when he grows tired and he lowers his staff, that the Amalekites started winning. And only when Joshua and Caleb would raise his arms for him, that they were able to overcome them. So there's this whole supernatural war going on behind the scenes that we're not reading in the Bible. I think that Moses is up there battling against the an Amalekite sorcerer on the other side of the valley.
Yeah, for sure. They took. I mean, I've been saying this for a while now. Before I let you go, we're coming up on our time here, man. You got to come back on the show, man. There's so many other questions we need to talk about, but they take all the mysticism and the supernatural out of the Bible. They take it all out, right? And I have my own personal beliefs on why they did that, and why they don't even really, in a lot of churches, don't really even teach it anymore to go through with it. But what you said is 100% probably exactly what was going on. Why would he have to hold his arms up for them to win? It was for a reason. It wasn't for God saying doing it for funsies, right? Hey man, hold this till your shoulders burn. There was a reason for it, right? And they take it out, man. But like again, when you go and look at and people also say like, oh look, they were committing genocide. Well, they're under the impression they're just fighting other humans. They weren't fighting other humans. They were fighting things that were extremely evil and extremely dangerous, and they were following the commands to finish what the flood didn't get, man. That was to wipe out the last of the Nephilim bloodlines, or the serpent seeds, as you were talking about as well.
I think that answers the woo, though. That's what I was getting at, because all the people that say, oh, it can't be a human because of the UFO, the orbs, and the phasing in and out of reality. According to the Book of Enoch, these Nephilim, their spirits are left to wander as demons and torment mankind. So it's like, if these hairy, quote-unquote, Sasquatch-looking men that died in antiquity, their spirits are left here. So wouldn't they want to choose a familiar form?
Yeah.
And at the same time, their fallen angel uncles, if they're traveling around in UFO, spacecraft, if that's their way of conveyance, or these orbs, of course they're going to be associated with them and close by and checking on their dead offspring and their relatives and things like that. All that stuff's going to be correlated because they're dead Nephilim spirits of these hybrid races that were known sorcerers.
And yeah, I mean, that I'm sure that's well received in that Bigfoot community. I get a lot of heat when I talk to my Bigfoot guys in there or whatever. I'm like, if it was a leftover dinosaur, we would have already found them. These things are obviously not what we think they are, and getting caught up on the woo. And I did some stories about the Serpent, long stories or whatever. We grew up in the Appalachian Mountains. We've seen all types of weird stuff. I've heard of these things literally rising up out of the ground, like coming up out of the earth, rising up out of the earth, right? Looking like
Harley's pictures and stuff, man. They're wild.
Yeah, man. So and again, that's the thing. You lay out a whole spread, and this is my one thing about like other researchers. everything you just laid out, Doc, and they focus on the woo. That's like what? Like what are you talking about? Like did you just not hear anything we talked about, right? And you focus on that woo. I don't know. Maybe he thinks it's fun to go woo woo and get you to look around in the woods. Like maybe maybe he wants. Why do they throw rocks at you sometimes, right? Like maybe they just think it's fun to do. But yeah, man, that's the thing that I get with when I talk to people. I just laid out all this stuff for you, and your gotcha with me is like, oh, what about that woo? I'm like, okay, yeah, sure. What about that woo? Did you not hear nothing we said about Esau or whatever?
What about it?
Yeah, exactly. Right. What about the woo? Who cares? What about the woo? Who cares, right? Anyway, Doc, great conversation, man. Please, you got to agree to come back, man. All right, because I got.
Oh man, I love to come back. But,
yeah,
but yeah, there's the cover, guys. If you get on Amazon, look for that big hairy yoked guy.
Yep. And exactly, it'll be back there on my collection when it comes in after I read it. It'll go up on the wall of fame back there to do with it. Doc Brown, everybody, go get his book. The link will be down there. It's called The Epic of Esau. It's a great from conversation we just had. I'm very intrigued to read it and everything like that. Doc, one more time, tell everybody where they can find you, and we'll walk us out of here.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you having me. Appreciate the conversation. Love to come back and take deeper dives because, yeah, this book is 270 pages. It's 15 chapters. So, yeah, we didn't even scratch the surface,
man. The surface on that, so, yeah. So, Doc,
no.
This is what we'll do, Doc. Let me get it, let me read it, and then come back and let's break it down, man. Sound good?
Yeah, sounds good.
All right.
But yeah, guys, anywhere you consume content, just search me up, Prometheus Lens Podcast, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, all those fine establishments, Instagram, Facebook, X, anywhere you can consume social media or podcast content. And the website is PrometheusLensPodcast.com. And the book is on Amazon. I do have it in ebook form for $10 or the physical copy for $20.
There you go, ladies and gentlemen. Cheaper than the price of eggs right now. You can get you a book and you can get smart up. And you know how we do around here, nerds. Thumbs up, subscribe, share. All the Doc's information will be in the description. Go give him some follows. Go give him some love. Go order that book. If you got any questions, leave it in the comments. He'll answer it. We'll get back to it. But don't ask me nothing stupid like what about the woo? Because I'll put that on a t-shirt and mail it to your house. So, yep. And you know how we do around here, nerds. That's all you get for $1. And we're out.
Subscribe now and turn on the notifications to join us on this extraordinary journey into the unknown.